Welcome back to our channel, your go-to destination for the most in-depth analysis of the dramatic and unexpected plot twists in The Young and the Restless. The courtroom drama between Victor and Billy is here to begin. Grab your favorite drink, sit back, and join us as we analyze the thrilling events unfolding right now. The corporate landscape of Genoa City is currently trembling under the weight of an impending cataclysm, a war forged in the fires of historical grievances and fueled by the desperate ambitions of broken men. At the very epicenter of this brewing storm stands Billy Abbott, a man perpetually haunted by the towering legacy of his late father, John Abbott. For weeks, Billy has been consumed by a manic, almost feverish obsession with Chancellor Industries, driven by the discovery of a decades-old loan document. This yellowed piece of paper, detailing a financial lifeline thrown by John Abbott to Philip Chancellor II, has become Billy's holy grail. He views it not merely as a legal contract, but as a divine mandate, a retroactive validation of his worthiness to sit on the corporate throne. However, in his blinding pursuit of power and validation, Billy has tragically underestimated the darkest and most formidable force in Genoa City. He has marched onto the battlefield armed with a relic, entirely oblivious to the fact that his perceived ultimate weapon is about to be masterfully turned against him, transforming his grand crusade into a suffocating trap. Billy's psychological state has deteriorated into a dangerous paranoia, cloaked in the false bravado of a conqueror. He has alienated his family, ignored the desperate pleas of his loved ones, and pushed his pregnant partner to the brink of emotional collapse, all in the name of reclaiming a legacy he believes is his birthright. Every waking moment is consumed by the intoxicating fantasy of marching into the Chancellor boardroom and declaring himself the undisputed king. He clutches the historical loan documents like a shield, convincing himself that the unpaid debt from the 1970s gives him an ironclad, undeniable legal claim to the entire corporate empire. The guilt of his past failures, the embezzlement, the gambling, the endless string of disappointments he brought to the Abbott name, are all meant to be washed away by this singular, monumental victory. Yet, beneath this manic high lies a terrifying, unspoken fear. The terror that if this fails, he is truly nothing. This desperate fragility makes him dangerously blind to the strategic maneuvers happening in the shadows, particularly those orchestrated by the ruthless patriarch of the Newman dynasty. Observing this chaotic spectacle from his impenetrable fortress at the Newman Ranch is Victor Newman, a man who has spent a lifetime mastering the art of psychological warfare and corporate annihilation. Victor does not act on impulse. He operates with the cold, calculated precision of an apex predator. Watching Billy parade around Genoa City with his supposed undeniable proof, Victor feels a familiar, chilling sense of amusement mixed with profound disdain. He recognizes Billy's manic energy for exactly what it is, the desperate flailing of a boy trying to wear a man's suit. Instead of engaging in a messy, public shouting match, Victor decides to strike at the very foundation of Billy's delusion. He understands that the historical loan is not a source of strength, but a glaring, fatal vulnerability. Victor resolves to execute a preemptive legal strike so devastating, so meticulously crafted, that it will not only strip Billy of his claim to Chancellor Industries, but will completely humiliate him on a public stage, reminding the entire business world of the absolute supremacy of the Newman Empire. The mobilization of Victor's legal armada is a terrifying display of infinite resources and unyielding power. Behind the heavy mahogany doors of Newman Enterprises, a shadow war room is assembled, populated by the most ruthless, brilliant, and morally flexible legal minds money can buy. Victor issues a singular, chilling directive: dismantle John Abbott's loan document down to its molecular structure. The lawyers descend upon the historical paperwork like vultures, scrutinizing every faded signature, every archaic legal clause, and every forgotten stipulation. They dig into the financial archives of the 1970s, seeking any microscopic discrepancy that can be weaponized. The atmosphere in the Newman war room is thick with predatory anticipation, a stark contrast to Billy's isolated, frantic pacing. Victor's strategy is not merely to challenge the document, but to completely obliterate its legitimacy, preparing a legal onslaught that will hit Billy with the force of a freight train, leaving him absolutely no room to breathe, let alone counterattack. The forensic breakdown of the historical loan yields a treasure trove of legal ammunition for the Newman legal team. They meticulously construct a multi-tiered defense designed to suffocate Billy's claim from every conceivable angle. First, they target the statute of limitations, preparing to argue that a debt uncollected for decades cannot suddenly be resurrected to usurp a multi-billion-dollar modern conglomerate. Second, they cast a dark, insidious shadow over the authenticity of the documents themselves, preparing to allege that the paperwork might have been forged, altered, or manipulated by a desperate Billy Abbott. Finally, they isolate highly specific, unfulfilled clauses within the original contract, arguing that John Abbott himself failed to execute certain mandatory actions, thereby rendering the entire agreement legally void. Victor oversees this process with a steely, approving gaze, knowing that by attacking the core integrity of the document, he is attacking the core integrity of Billy himself, pushing his longtime rival into an inescapable corner of defensive panic. When the trap is finally sprung, it is executed with the ruthless elegance that has defined Victor Newman's entire career. There is no warning, no preliminary negotiation, only a sudden, overwhelming legal bombardment. Victor's attorneys file a massive injunction, a preemptive legal strike that immediately halts any action Billy intended to take against Chancellor Industries. The legal filings are leaked to the financial press with calculated precision, painting Billy not as a rightful heir reclaiming his legacy, but as a delusional, desperate fraud attempting to steal a company using expired, legally bankrupt, and potentially fabricated paperwork. The narrative shifts instantly. Billy is no longer the aggressive conqueror, he is the cornered suspect. Victor's public relations machinery amplifies the allegations, ensuring that the entire corporate landscape of Genoa City views Billy's claim with extreme skepticism and thinly veiled contempt. The psychological blow is immediate and devastating, designed to break Billy's spirit before he even sets foot inside a courtroom. The arrival of the legal summons shatters Billy's manic delusion like a hammer against fragile glass. The sheer volume and complexity of the Newman legal filings are suffocating. As he reads through the allegations of forgery, expired statutes, and voided clauses, the intoxicating high of his perceived victory evaporates, replaced by a cold, paralyzing dread. The walls of his ambition begin to close in on him. He realizes, with a sickening drop in his stomach, that Victor has not just anticipated his move, but has laid a trap so deep and complex that escaping it seems impossible. The emotional toll is catastrophic. Billy is suddenly consumed by the terrifying realization that he has alienated his siblings, betrayed the trust of his pregnant partner, and risked the pristine reputation of the Abbott name, all for a piece of paper that Victor Newman is effortlessly tearing to shreds. The paralyzing fear of impending failure grips his heart, manifesting as a frantic, breathless panic as he desperately searches for a countermaneuver that simply does not exist. The atmosphere within the courtroom during the preliminary hearing is incredibly oppressive, thick with the unspoken history of the Abbott and Newman feud. The heavy oak paneling seems to absorb the tension as the two factions take their respective sides. Billy sits at the plaintiff's table, his posture rigid, his eyes darting with a mixture of defiance and barely concealed terror. Across the aisle sits Victor Newman, exuding an aura of absolute, terrifying calm. The contrast is stark and deeply psychological. Victor's mere presence is a weapon, a silent assertion of dominance that seems to suck the oxygen out of the room. The judge's gavel echoes like a death knell for Billy's ambitions as the Newman legal team begins their surgical dismantling of his entire case. The supporters Billy manage to scrape together watch in mounting horror as the reality of the situation sets in. This is not a fair legal battle. It is a calculated public execution of Billy's corporate dreams. As the proceedings unfold, Victor's psychological dominance becomes the defining feature of the conflict. He does not need to speak to command the room. His silent, unwavering gaze directed at Billy is enough to convey volumes of contempt and assured victory. The Newman attorneys methodically present their evidence, laying out the timeline of the expired statute of limitations with brutal clarity. They introduce expert testimony, questioning the preservation and authenticity of the decades-old signatures, casting a dark cloud of suspicion directly over Billy's character. Every legal point scored by the Newman team feels like a physical blow to Billy. He watches helplessly as the narrative he so carefully constructed, the narrative of the wronged Abbott son reclaiming his father's stolen kingdom, is twisted into a story of pathetic desperation and potential fraud. The psychological warfare is absolute, designed to make Billy question his own sanity, and the validity of his own memories. The specific legal arguments deployed by Victor's team are impenetrable. They meticulously dissect the arcane language of the 1970s contract, highlighting a specific stipulation that required John Abbott to formally declare a default within a narrow window of time, a window that closed decades ago. They argue eloquently that the failure to execute this specific clause nullifies the transfer of ownership, reducing the document to nothing more than a historical artifact with zero legal bearing on the modern corporate structure of Chancellor Industries. Furthermore, they lean heavily into the accusation of forgery, subtly suggesting that a man with Billy's history of gambling, instability, and moral flexibility would certainly be capable of fabricating documents to secure a multi-billion-dollar windfall. This multi-pronged attack leaves Billy's legal counsel scrambling, completely overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of the Newman defense. The legal avenue to Chancellor Industries is systematically boarded up, locked, and set ablaze before Billy's very eyes. The emotional devastation that washes over Billy Abbott is profound and agonizing. As the judge signals a clear inclination to dismiss his claims based on the overwhelming evidence presented by the Newman team, Billy experiences a total psychological collapse. The grand vision of honoring John Abbott's legacy twists into a grotesque nightmare of public humiliation. He feels the crushing weight of guilt, knowing that he has dragged his revered father's name through the mud of a scandalous, failed legal coup. The agonizing realization that Jack, Ashley, and Tracy were entirely correct in their warnings echoes in his mind, amplifying his profound sense of isolation. He has sacrificed his family's respect, jeopardized his relationship with Sally, and risked the stability of his unborn child for a phantom victory that has now evaporated into thin air. The pain of this defeat is not just professional, it is a deep, existential wound that strikes at the very core of his fractured identity. In the aftermath of the crushing legal blow, Victor Newman stands triumphant, his power and influence reaffirmed before the entire city. The preemptive strike has worked flawlessly, neutralizing a significant threat while simultaneously sending a chilling message to anyone who might dare to challenge the Newman supremacy. Victor's victory solidifies his position as the undisputed puppet master of Genoa City's corporate landscape, leaving the Abbott camp in a state of absolute disarray. The defeat forces Lily and Kane to recalibrate their own strategies, realizing that aligning with or fighting against Billy is now a moot point, as Victor has effectively removed him from the board. The power dynamics of Chancellor Industries remain firmly out of Billy's grasp, protected by the impenetrable legal shield forged by Victor's ruthless ambition. The Newman dynasty stands taller than ever, built on the shattered dreams of its adversaries. The psychological toll on Billy in the wake of this absolute defeat is terrifying to behold. Stripped of his legal standing, publicly humiliated, and alienated from his support systems, he descends into a dark, suffocating paranoia. The loss of Chancellor Industries is no longer just a failed business venture, it is the loss of his perceived salvation. He paces the floors of his empty office, haunted by the ghosts of his past failures and the mocking spectre of Victor Newman's triumph. The crushing reality of his powerlessness breeds a dangerous, volatile resentment. He feels cornered, like a wounded animal backed against a wall, with no legal avenues left to pursue and no family to catch his fall. The agonizing guilt of his actions battles with a toxic, burning desire for retribution, creating a psychological pressure cooker that is bound to explode. As the dust settles on his shattered legal campaign, Billy Abbott is left completely isolated in the ruins of his own making. The documents that were supposed to be his crown jewels are now worthless scraps of paper, rendered void by the relentless machinery of Victor Newman. Stripped of his weapons, his dignity, and his hope, Billy stares into the abyss of his uncertain future. The manic energy that once fueled his corporate crusade now curdles into something far darker and more unpredictable. With the courtroom doors firmly locked against him and his enemies celebrating his demise, the desperate Abbott's son realizes that if he cannot win by playing within the bounds of the law, he might be forced to step outside of it. As he sits alone in the suffocating silence, a dangerous, unhinged resolve begins to form in his mind, leaving the residents of Genoa City entirely unaware of the catastrophic lengths to which a broken man will go when he has absolutely nothing left to lose.